Hello all. Today we are going to see Chapter 8, How Do Organisms Reproduce? Assertion and Reason-Based Questions. Now you all might have seen that assertion and reason-based questions usually have 5 options. Usually only 4 options are given. But the 5th option is also there in some question papers. So there are 2 statements. One is assertion and one is a reason. And we need to choose among these options. So the first option is both assertion and reason are true and reason is the correct explanation of A. If both assertion and reason are true but reason is not the correct explanation of A, assertion is true but reason is false. Assertion is true but assertion is false but reason is true, and both assertion and reason are wrong. Okay. So these are the options that we have. So let us start with the first question where it says, assertion, DNA copying is necessary during reproduction. Reason, DNA copying leads to transmission of characters from parents to offsprings. So assertion says that DNA copying is necessary during reproduction, whereas reason says DNA copying leads to transmission of characters from parents to offspring. So we all know that DNA carries all the important information about an organism and it is passed on to the next generation. Okay, we receive 2 sets of chromosomes, one from parents and one from the father and one from the mother, and this leads to the transmission of characters, okay, in the form of genes. All right, so both assertion and reason are true and reason is the correct explanation of the assertion. I hope it is clear. The next one says that assertion, individual produced by asexual reproduction are known as clones. Reason, they are known as clones because they are genetically identical. Okay. Now, in assertion, they are saying that individuals produced by asexual reproduction are known as clones. So let us consider amoeba. Okay, amoeba, as we all know, reproduces asexually by the method of binary fission, and when it reproduces, it produces 2 daughter cells which are identical to the mother or the parent amoeba. So that is the reason we call it as a clone. They are genetically identical. The variations are negligible in case of asexual reproduction. So your assertion and reason here are true and reason is the correct explanation of assertion. Moving forward, assertion, spores are unicellular bodies. Reason, the parent body simply breaks up into smaller pieces on maturation. Okay, so here assertion, they are saying that spores are unicellular bodies. So we know that assertion is true. Spores, that is the rhizopus which produces the spores, are unicellular. They are unicellular in nature. They are single-celled. Okay. And reason, the parent body simply breaks up into smaller pieces on maturation. Now, in spore formation, as you all know that the spores are let out when the conditions are favorable, and these spores settle on a substrate such as in case of bread mold, it settles on a piece of bread and continues to grow. Whereas the reason that they have given here is regarding the process of fragmentation and not about spore formation. So here the reason is true and the assertion is true and the reason is false. Okay, so this does not apply to spore formation. Alright. Moving on to the next question. Assertion, colonies of yeast multiply in sugar solution. Reason, sugar is made up of sucrose which provide energy for sustaining all the life activities. Okay, So colonies of yeast multiply in sugar solution, which is true. Yeast definitely needs a medium to grow, to multiply. And sugar, as we all know, is made up of sucrose, which produce energy. It's a type of a carbohydrate which produces energy for sustaining all life activities. So both assertion and reason are true, and reason is the correct explanation of assertion. Alright. Next, growth hormones stimulate the growth of different parts. Reason, gonadotrophin stimulates the production of sex hormones. Now you all know that the growth hormones are secreted by the pituitary gland, and this helps in the growth of different body parts. Growth hormone definitely helps in growth of the different body parts. And reason, gonadotrophin stimulates the production of sex hormones. Yes, gonadotrophins, that is the testosterone. Testosterone and estrogen are known as the gonadotrophins, right? Okay. But is there any relation with the assertion and the reason? Definitely not. Okay. So assertion and reason are true. Both are true. But reason is not the correct explanation of assertion. Alright. Assertion, errors in DNA copying create new body designs. Reason, DNA is the blueprint for body designs and characters. Okay. So errors in DNA copying create new body designs. Is it true? It is false, because errors in DNA copying leads to genetic variations, but the body design remains the same. Okay. So when two parents are involved, especially in sexual reproduction, the ova and the sperm, when these two fuse together, it leads to the formation of a zygote, which is entirely different. Or suppose, let us say, the embryo that is formed after the fusion and division, we can say that this embryo is entirely different from the parents genetically, but the body design remains the same. The external morphology remains the same. The external structure remains the same. But genetically, we are very different from each other. That is whether it is between the siblings or between the child and the parents. Okay. So errors in DNA copying does not create new body designs. Okay. So assertion is false and reason is true. Alright. Assertion, plants are vegetatively propagated even though they bear seeds. Reason, potatoes reproduces through tubers, apples by cutting. Okay, so assertion, they are saying that plants are vegetatively propagated even though they bear seeds. Here, assertion is true. In some cases, plants which reproduces, which bear seeds are also vegetatively propagated. Okay, but reason is also correct. Potatoes reproduces through tubers, apples by cutting. So both are true, but reason is not the correct explanation of assertion. Okay. Next. Assertion, at puberty in boys, voice begins to crack and thick hair grows on face. Reason, at puberty there is decreased secretion of testosterone in boys. Okay, so assertion, they are saying that at puberty in boys, voice begins to crack and thick hair grows on the face. So these are some of the secondary sexual characters that we observe in males when the boys attain the puberty. Now, what is the reason that we observe all these changes, whether it is the change in voice, growth of hair, growth of muscular body? All this is because of the production of the hormone, the male hormone, testosterone. So reason what they have given here is that at puberty there is decreased secretion, which is a false statement. Okay, there is an increase in the testosterone. So here assertion is true, but the reason is false simply because the testosterone secretion is increased. So assertion is true, but reason is false. I hope it's clear. Alright. Moving forward. Assertion. In female, the egg is carried from the ovary to the womb through a thin oviduct or the fallopian tube. Reason. The uterus opens into the vagina through the cervix. Okay. Now, if you see the structure of the female reproductive system, you can see that there are two hand-like structures and the ovaries are present just like this. And here you see that this is the uterus which opens into the cervix and then into the vagina. Okay. So this is the uterus. Okay, so these are the ovaries, and ovaries helps in the production of the ova, which is carried by the tube-like structure called as the fallopian tube. Okay, fallopian tube or the oviduct. So this helps to carry the ova, the egg, from the ovaries to the womb, which means the uterus, through the thin fallopian tube. This is a correct statement. And then they say that the uterus opens into vagina through the cervix. So here is the cervix and it opens into the birth canal or the passage called as the vagina. Okay. So this statement is also true. So here both assertion and reason are true, but the reason is not the correct explanation of assertion. There is no connectivity between assertion and the reason, but both the statements are true. Okay? Alright. Placenta serves as nutritive, respiratory and excretory organ of the fetus. Reason, villi are present on the embryo side of the placenta. So placenta, as you all know, is a special nutritive tissue which is formed during the gestation period or the period of pregnancy. So what is the purpose of this placenta? Placenta basically acts like respiratory organ, it acts like the excretory organ, it helps in the exchange of waste, transport of oxygen, okay, then it helps in the exchange, the transport of antibodies. So all the functions are performed by placenta, okay, from the mother to the fetus. Reason, villi are present on the embryo side of the placenta. So here you need to understand that villi is present on the embryo side. So yes, yeah, exactly. So villi are nothing but they are finger-like projections or brush-like structures which simply helps in the more exchange or more absorption of the gases and nutrients by the embryo. So yes, both the statements are true, and one thing is that the reason is not the correct explanation of assertion. Assertion and reason are true, but reason is not the correct explanation for the first statement. Okay. Assertion, amoeba reproduces by binary fission. Okay. Amoeba reproduces by binary fission. We know that binary fission means when a unicellular organism divides into two daughter cells. Binary, bi means two. Fission means breaking into two. Okay. Reason, all the unicellular organisms reproduce by asexual reproduction. Okay. Now here we can say that assertion and reason both are true, and reason is the correct explanation of assertion, because here they are saying that amoeba reproduces by binary fission, which is a true statement. Reason, they are saying that all unicellular organisms reproduce by asexual reproduction, which is also a true statement. And here they have given you the example of amoeba, which is a unicellular organism. So we can say that these two are related to each other. So assertion and reason are true, and reason is the correct explanation of assertion. Moving forward, the process of DNA copying does not result in variation. Reason, no biochemical reaction is reliable. Okay. So assertion, process of DNA copying does not result in variation, which is a false statement, because we have seen that when the DNA copying takes place, when the DNA from two parents, okay, or whether even if it is a single parent in asexual reproduction also, when the offsprings they get the DNA from the parents, we can see that DNA copying has some errors. Okay, there are certain errors during the DNA copying which leads to the formation of a different protein. Okay, this DNA basically is made up of proteins. So when proteins, there is a formation of a new protein, new structure is formed, this means that variation is created. So this statement is a false statement. Now moving to the reason, no biochemical reaction is reliable. It is true. We cannot depend simply on biochemical reactions. Alright? None of the biochemical reactions are reliable. We cannot say that biochemical reactions will give you 100% result, which means that there are certain errors in the biochemical reaction. So assertion is false and reason is true. Since this DNA copying is also a biochemical reaction, we can say that errors are there in the DNA copying process. Okay, so I hope this statement is clear. Spores are covered by thick walls in rhizopus. Reason, the thick wall protects the spores until they come into contact of a surface. Okay, so as you all know that rhizopus, also called as the bread mold, you might have seen the structure of the rhizopus. Basically it has a sporangium which is held with the help of a hyphae. Okay, the sporangium is the reproductive part and the hyphae is the non-reproductive part. Okay, this is the hyphae and this is the sporangium. So you know that this is the reproductive part and this is the non-reproductive part. The main function is attachment, okay, only for the sake of holding or to support. Now, you know that the sporangium basically has a very thick covering because the spores need to be protected when the conditions are unfavorable. Again, when the conditions become favorable, this will break and the spores will come out, falling onto a surface and making the growth of the next individual. Okay, so both assertion and reason are true and reason is the correct explanation of assertion. Alright. Next, vegetative propagation makes possible propagation of plants that have lost the capacity to produce seeds. Reason, new plants are developed from seeds in vegetative propagation. Okay, now here we need to understand that vegetative propagation is a type of method that is used on plants which bear seeds. They do bear seeds, but these seeds are not viable, which means they are not functioning or not fertile, okay, to produce a fruit or a flower. So such plants we use vegetative propagation. We also use plants which do not produce seeds at all. So such plants are also used or cultivated by vegetative propagation. So vegetative propagation makes possible propagation of plants that have lost the capacity to produce seeds. This is a true statement. Okay, the statement, the assertion is true. Okay, so last there was one more question in the previous question. We saw that vegetative plants which bear seeds, we use vegetative propagation. Yes, we use vegetative propagation for both the type of plants, whether they produce seeds or whether they don't produce seeds, we use vegetative propagation. But on those plants which produce seeds, we use vegetative propagation because the seeds are not viable. They do not have the capacity to produce, they do not have the capacity to be fertile, or the plants, they don't produce the seeds at all. Okay, so both the conditions we use vegetative propagation. Reason, new plants are developed from seeds in vegetative propagation. This is a false statement. The reason is false because new plants are not developed from seeds in vegetative propagation. In vegetative propagation, we make use of the leaf, we make use of the stem and the roots. Okay, so these are the different structures from which a new individual plant is cultivated. Okay, seeds are not involved in vegetative propagation. I hope the statement is clear. So assertion is true, reason is false. Okay. Assertion, pollen are produced by all flowers. Okay. Reason, stamen is the male reproductive part of the flower and produces pollen grain. Okay. Now assertion, they have given that pollen are produced by all flowers. So first we need to understand that pollens are the male part of the flower. Okay, which means those plants which bear only the female flowers. There are two types of flowers, unisexual flowers and bisexual flowers. Unisexual flowers means they carry only one reproductive part. Either it could be the male reproductive part or it could be the female reproductive part. So in such plants, you can see that either the flowers carry the male reproductive part or they carry only the female reproductive part. So this statement is false because in those flowers where there is only the female reproductive part, that is only the gynoecium is present, then the pollens are not produced since they are present in the anther. Anther or the whole part is called as the stamens. We call this as stamens, right? This is the anther, this is the filament, and this is the stamens. Okay, so only those plants which bear male flowers, only in such flowers pollen are produced. Or the flower should be bisexual, that is it should have both male and female part. So for that, if you have not understood or if you don't know the structure of flower, you can just watch the video to understand the structure of flower. I will be posting the link just below this video, okay, in the description box. Okay. Reason, stamen is the male reproductive part of the flower and produces pollen grain. This statement is true. Okay, so the first statement, assertion, is false and reason is true because stamen is the male reproductive part of the flower and produces pollen grain, like just now I explained you with this diagram. Alright. Assertion, the human embryo gets implanted in the fallopian tube. Reason, embryo gets nutrition from mother's blood with the help of a special tissue called placenta. Okay, just now we discussed with the structure of the uterus And as you all know that there are 3 sites. So you have to remember these 3 sites. One, the site of ova production or the egg production takes place in the ovary. Okay, ovary is the site where ova is produced. Second, site of fertilization. Fertilization means where the male and the female gametes meet. So this takes place in the fallopian tube. And the third site is the site of implantation. Site of implantation means after the female and male gamete fuse together, the zygote which is formed comes and gets implanted in the uterus. So uterus is the site of implantation. So human embryo gets implanted in the fallopian tube is a false statement. It's a false statement because it gets implanted in the uterus. Implantation takes place in the uterus. Implantation means settling. Okay. So settling of the zygote and the embryo, that is the embryo, takes place in the uterus. Then it develops into a fetus. Okay. Reason, embryo gets nutrition from the mother's blood with the help of special tissue called placenta. Okay. Embryo gets nutrition from mother's blood with the help of a specialized tissue called placenta. This is a true statement. But assertion is false and the reason is true. Okay. Statement 2 is true. Alright. So assertion is false and reason is true. Okay. Hydra reproduces by budding. Reason, Hydra is one of the simplest invertebrates known. Alright. So assertion, Hydra reproduces by budding is true. Hydra reproduces by budding, it reproduces by regeneration. Okay. So this is a true statement. Is Hydra one of the simplest invertebrates known? Yes, this is also a true statement. But these two does not have any connectivity between them. So assertion and reason are true, but reason is not the correct explanation of the assertion. That the second statement doesn't say anything about budding here. It simply says another statement about Hydra, which is a true statement, but there is no connectivity between the two statements. Okay. Assertion, pollination is a process by which male gamete fuses with the female gamete in plants. Alright. Reason, fertilization is followed by pollination in plants. Okay. First, you need to understand that pollination means the transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma. Okay. So when the pollen grain, basically the male gametes are present in the pollen, and this pollen, when it goes and settles on the stigma, okay, this pollen when it settles on the stigma, this process is called as pollination. Now why pollination has to take place? Pollination has to take place so that the male gametes which are present in the pollen can fuse with the female egg which is present in the ovary. Okay, so that is the reason this whole pollination process takes place. But pollination is not the process by which male gamete fuses with female gamete. Male gamete fuses with female gamete by a process called as fertilization. That is not pollination. Of course, pollination is the first step for the male gamete to reach the female gamete. But this fusion is not pollination. This fusion is fertilization. So this statement is false. Okay. Reason, fertilization is followed by pollination in plants. Yes, fertilization is followed by pollination, which means first step, pollination has to take place. That is, the pollen has to go settle on the stigma, then form a pollen tube, and then the male gametes reaches the ovules which are present in the ovary inside this part. Then only fusion will take place. Then only the male gametes will fuse with the female gamete. Reason they have given that fertilization is followed by pollination in plants. But just now I explained to you that pollination takes place first, followed by fertilization. So pollination is followed by fertilization, whereas fertilization is not followed by pollination. So this statement is false. So here assertion and reason both are false. Okay. Moving on to the next. Copper T is an effective method of contraception and copper T prevents ovulation. Okay. So copper T is an effective method of contraception. It is an IUCD, that is intrauterine contraceptive device. All right. So copper T is known as an intrauterine contraceptive device, and it is an effective method of contraception. Okay. But reason it prevents ovulation, which is a false statement, because copper T does not prevent ovulation. Copper T prevents the entry of the sperms through to get fertilized with the ova that is produced. Okay. So copper T does not prevent ovulation. This is a false statement. Alright. So assertion is true and reason is false. Now moving to the next question. Assertion, the sex of the sperm is determined by the sperm. Reason, a sperm can contain either an X or Y chromosome. So if you study the sex determination, we'll be studying this in the next chapter, actually in the chapter heredity, where we can say that the sex of the sperm is determined by the sperm. Okay, only a male can decide because of the presence of the sperm. Sperm is of two types, X and Y chromosome. It carries two chromosomes, X and Y chromosome, whereas the female carries the XX type of chromosome. So when one X fuses with the other X, it leads to the formation of a female, and one Y, when it fuses with the X, it forms the male. So the sperm can decide the sex of the individual, which is a true statement. Okay. Reason, a sperm can contain either X or Y chromosome. So this is also a true statement, and both are correct and correct explanation of the assertion. Okay. Next, HIV/AIDS is a bacterial disease. Reason, it spreads through sharing food and water. First of all, HIV is not a bacterial disease, it's a viral disease. Okay, HIV is the virus and AIDS is the disease. HIV is human immunodeficiency virus and AIDS is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Okay, so HIV is the virus, AIDS is the the disease cause, and it is a viral disease and it's not a bacterial disease. Okay, reason, it spreads through sharing food and water. You have to understand that HIV/AIDS is a sexually transmitted disease. It's an STD and it doesn't spread through food and water. It spreads through having unprotected sex, use of needles which are already injected. Okay. So all these are the different ways that a sexually transmitted disease can spread, but it doesn't spread through food and water. So both the statements here are false. Alright. Moving on. Assertion, urethra in human male act as urogenital canal. Okay. Reason, urethra carries only urine while sperms are carried by vasa differentia. Now, when I was teaching the structure of the male reproductive part, I told you that in human male, urethra acts as a passage for both urine as well as for the sperms. Okay, so it acts as a common urogenital canal, which is a true statement. The assertion is true. But reason, urethra carries only urine, it is a false statement, because this is a passage for both urine as well as for sperms. So this is a false statement. So here assertion is true, but the reason is false. All right. So if you have any doubts regarding the structure of the flower, structure of the male and the female reproductive system, I'll be posting the links in the description box. Please go through the video properly, and then you can understand, then you can come and solve these assertion and reason type of questions. So please read the NCERT textbook line by line, and then it will be easy for you to understand such questions. Okay. So assertion and reason is very easy to solve. You just have to look at both the statements and understand whether both the statements are true or false, and if there is any connectivity between them, then you have to choose the options, respective options. All right. So if you have any doubts, you can post it in the comment box. Do like my video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching.